You'll never guess it went off the table.
Okay, we really need to do something about this. You're getting a dice tray this year.
Yeah, I have to just make one. Two.
Okay, Chris, the design challenge we will be taking upon ourselves today is make the most dangerous yet survivable 10-foot by 10-foot by 10-foot room.
It's so specific.
So I don't see this credited to a particular former guest, so it's possible that this is a topic that we came up with in a drug-fueled craze at some point. So
Yes.
We'll see where it goes.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to Roll for Topic, a roundtable discussion about topics related to running role-playing games. I'm Chris Salzman.
And I'm Andy Rao.
Andy, we're like 90-some episodes in, and I think I finally have a handle on our intro, and now I'm starting to feel like maybe we should change it up.
Yeah, well, you spun that out flawlessly, so I'm impressed.
Yeah.
The one time I tried doing the intro, it took like 7 takes, so...
Maybe for episode 100, we will change it up. So, Andy, we are going to have a little bit of a shorter episode again this week. We're still sort of in the midst of vacation travel and then also getting back from vacation travel.
Yep.
But I just got back from a big trip, so I had a couple things that I wanted to talk about regarding that. So,
Fantastic.
do you mind if we start with that before we dive into the topic?
Yeah, I've got some sort of, military-grade aircraft hovering over the house, so
Okay.
I think it's going away.
Okay, well, let me know if they're going to start a raid on your house.
Yeah, well, I guess if I go abruptly silent, you can just hang up and publish the podcast, and then...
Yeah, well, I mean, it's time for your comeuppance. But, so we just got back from about a week up on Beaver Island. So this is a island off the... Well, I mean, it's in Michigan, but, it's within Lake Michigan. Most people know Mackinac Island, but Beaver Island is sort of in that same area, but just a little bit further north. Yeah, so it was a really fun trip, although super exhausting because we brought a toddler along with us, because you can't leave toddlers at home when you go on vacation. But yeah, it was super good. Throughout the trip, of course, I was always thinking about like running games and stuff. Our friend John calls this GM brain, where you can't just like enjoy a moment for what it is. You're just constantly thinking about like, what's the angle for gaming on this?
For sure, yep.
Yeah, so the trip had like a couple components that I thought were very gameable, or at least like made me start to rethink maybe how I might do something in a game. So we drove up and then took a ferry over to the island. So the ferry ride was about like 2 hours long, and this is the longest I've been on a boat in a while. Maybe ever, actually, 2 hours on a boat. But it's a lot of fun doing that, right? So like the kids enjoyed it and stuff, but like, my brain immediately went to like all the different ways you could do like a murder mystery and stuff on the boat. I should back up like one step. So the fun part about this, and I think we were chatting about it a little bit too, is that there was a music festival going on the island while we were up there.
Okay.
So the boat was filled with like normal ferry passengers, so people who had their vacation homes up on the ferry, people who were visiting like us, and that sorts of like, I guess like, normal Beaver Island visitors. But then there was also just this contingent of people who were like there for the music festival, who were planning on camping out just like in the island wherever they could find a spot, and then also some of the actual musicians and stuff too were on the boat, so you'd pass some guy in like a Grateful Dead t-shirt talking to someone in a Fish t-shirt, and then you'd also pass like a very rich retiree who was going back from the mainland to their well-appointed vacation home on the island. But yeah, so it made for like a fun mix of people, so again, like GM Brain was telling me like, yes, this is like a good thing to remember if you were putting NPCs together, like they don't all have to be the same, I don't know, like socioeconomic class, right? Even if you're within the same space. Yeah, so that was really fun.
I had the same thought. That makes me think that, the next time you're on a boat or a coach or something like that in a game, maybe put some people in there that are super out of place seeming, and just see what the PCs do with it.
Yeah, of course, like the music festival goers were like the friendly people on the boat, right? So I think like, so that was one thing I was thinking about. And then just like, when you're on a boat for a little bit, like it can seem like an expansive place, but the longer you're on a boat, the smaller it feels. Right, like there's only so much space, and so many different places you can go hang out, especially with a kid. Yeah, before you're like, okay, well, I know the entirety of this location.
Yeah. Well, I had to say that traveling to an island with a music festival is the setup for, I don't know, maybe 40% of zombie and horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously something bad was going to happen to you on your vacation, right?
Yes, yeah. It's like you have your pick of weaponry to fight the zombies there. Yeah, it's like, do you use a guitar or,
Right.
a bass guitar? Yeah. But then, so like once we got to the island proper, so I guess the other big part of this trip, right? Like again, so I mentioned we were traveling with a toddler is, so the toddler was not sleeping well because it's, a trip. And then it's also, just like, he's been going through a sleep regression anyway. So I've been thinking a lot about like exhaustion mechanics and like how exhaustion affects decision making as well. So like D&D has an exhaustion mechanic that I'm not super well aware of. I think like, over time, if you're not planning for rations and stuff, you take levels of exhaustion, and if you get to a certain level, it's like it's very bad. Very bad for the party and stuff. So my brain is just like totally fogged right now, right? Like after a week of little to no sleep.
Yeah.
So I feel like I have a couple of points of exhaustion right now. But it's something that's one of those things like encumbrance that I think when I'm looking at rule sets, I'm like, I'm not going to use that, right? Like who's going to really track that sort of stuff? But again, like it would have an actual like pretty major effect, I think, on an adventuring party. Like the fact that you can't, like you're not getting good rest and stuff like that. It's going to affect your decision making, make everything a little bit harder for you as well.
Yeah, that makes me think of a conversation. I might have had it with you and some former guests, or maybe it just lives in my brain. But lots of RPGs, have an exhaustion mechanic and mechanics for other kind of bad things that can happen to you or disabilities that can be inflicted on you. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when you talk to people that have experienced those experiences or disabilities, you realize that the game mechanic doesn't really match the actual main effect of it. So So I think you're right that one of the main things that you do when you become exhausted or just emotionally and physically overwhelmed is you start making bad decisions. You just lose ability to make good decisions. So instead of like, they have -1 to all attack rolls until they get a full rest or something like that. I sometimes wonder, it would be like, I don't know, every third thing you do, you make a mistake or you actually do something different.
Yes.
I have, I always check, I only have one working eye. So I always check in every game book I have that has some sort of a disadvantage. There's almost always like a one eye disadvantage in games that have kind of disadvantage systems. And I'm amazed. It's obvious that the people that wrote these didn't like close one of their eyes and try to evaluate what would actually happen, because it's usually something like, they take a penalty to ranged attacks or something. But like, no, I can shoot a gun as well as anyone else. But, the problem is like, flanking me is like twice as easy. And, things that really require gauging distance and stuff are tough. But these kind of oversimplified RPG rules, sometimes I think they come from people that aren't really talking to people who have actually experienced these things. Does that make sense? I just went on a big monologue.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Yeah. I'm even thinking about like, the shooting or like ranged weaponry stuff is a really funny one, because I mean, like how many... I think like if you're trying to shoot like a bow and arrow or something, like you're supposed to close one eye, right? Like you're supposed to try to like, it's just stuff like that where it's like, well, why would that? Yeah, I mean, like, and going back to the exhaustion thing, I mean, you're right on. Like, I mean, the stuff that it actually affects would be all of your social roles, right? It's not much totally. The like, because I mean, even when you're tired, you can sort of push through. You can still do like a lot of the same physical activities as you normally would. But like, if someone asks you a simple question, you're just like, I don't know. Like, I'm tired. I'm going to give you whatever answer will get me back to bed the fastest. Is sort of like what ends up happening.
Well, I mean this without any irony whatsoever. I would be super interested, especially in this age we have in the hobby where people are being really thoughtful and intentional about including disabilities and challenges and things like that in a realistic way in games. I would love to see a game that could boast, we have kind of a quote disadvantage system, and we have talked to a person that experiences this, and we've gotten and we are actually trying to replicate the real experience of having this, not just some dude sitting there and thinking like, oh, what would it be like to have only one arm? And, probably you have to take a -1 on attack rolls. Like,
yes, I've spent a grand total of 5 minutes thinking about it, and so now I have the right answer.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the last thing that I wanted to bring up about the island, and this is a much more fun one. So there was a surprising number of like harmless snakes on this island,
Ooh.
especially where we were staying at. It was a very rocky shoreline, so we went out there the first night, and I mean, scared probably like 20 snakes or so, like in this, like in the backyard and then down to the shoreline and stuff. So they're like little snakes, like garter snakes, like a couple like water-based snakes. I don't know my snakes. I'm not a herpetologist, but it was weird, right? Because like I live at least in a part of Michigan where like we don't really have as many snakes around.
Yeah.
But like these were as common, I guess, as you'd say, like squirrels, right? Like, and so like there was one time I walked by like a little tree, like a bush, and there was just a snake sort of curled up like at the top of the tree. It's just like, that's just sort of where they are. And
yeah,
you would see them sort of everywhere, and then they would go into the water to like hunt, I guess, whatever they eat, probably bugs and stuff like that. I don't think they were eating fish or anything, but they would they would slither into the water, and then they'd kind of just stick their head up, so you just see these like little snake heads sticking up in the water, and like the waves would go past and they would sort of like rise up a little bit to go above the wave and down. Yeah, but it was, I mean, I haven't really observed snakes before, but like it's definitely going to play into the next time I have some sort of, reptilian type creature in a game and stuff. I'm going to be drawing on those specific things. Cause yeah, just like stuff you just don't think about. And then we found a nest at one point, and they just like all kind of like curl up together in this like big mass of writhing snake and stuff, right? To hang out and, and go to sleep and stuff. Yeah. Right. And that's very scary to me. Like, I don't love snakes. And I mean, these are all very small ones, but you can imagine taking that and expanding it to like, human-sized snakes that are just doing the exact same activities. And you're like, okay, that's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Someone listening to the last episode and this episode is going to be like, okay, Andy and Chris went outside into nature for like the first time in their lives, apparently. But
yes. Yeah.
I do have to say, between last time's discussion and this one, I do feel kind of energized about portraying the outdoors a little bit better. Mm-hmm. And by better, I mean just with a little bit more depth than you usually do. Mm-hmm. The other day I was hanging out with a colleague who's a bird watcher, mm-hmm. and they had us be quiet for a minute and just listen to the number of birds out there. And they had an app that like listens for birdsong and identifies. And just sitting in like a suburban setting, there's like 12 different bird songs. All of that just makes me think the next time the PCs are trudging their way through some wilderness, I'm going to think about those, Mm-hmm. What are the kind of incidental creatures they can spot, like the snakes, the prairie dogs? What are the sounds that they hear when it's quiet? I don't know.
I mean, we talk a lot about Lord of the Rings, I think, on this podcast, and I think we both called out how we really enjoy the travel sequences in that more than we did when we were younger. And I mean, I think it's all those little details that, again, like, Andy and Chris go out in nature and experience it for the first time. It's like, I mean, like, I think a lot of that gets reduced if you're not thinking about it to like, and you're walking through the woods and you hear like a bird off in the distance or something, rather than the reality of it, like you're walking through the woods and it's just like, it's teeming with sounds. Yeah. All around you, you see a snake slither past you on the, on the path, and there's, 4 different bird songs going, and like, it's hot, and it's, like there's rocks on the trail, like all these like little details that I think you lied or you just sort of pass over when you're describing stuff, but really give a sense of place to the players as well, if you can describe it a bit.
Yeah, and if you've given much thought to sort of the general ecology of your setting, it'd be interesting mm-hmm. to hint at answers to questions like, when the PCs walk through this section of the woods, not only what animals and wildlife are around them, but what are they doing? Is this the time when they're out looking for food? Or is mm-hmm. this the time when they're looking for shelter, or whatever else it is that animals do? That's really the extent of the things I can think of that animals do, but
yeah. Well, I mean, and suddenly the forest goes quiet and you hear a large slithering sound off in the distance.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, we should talk about our topic a little bit, just because, as we mentioned up top, we have a little bit of a shorter time.
Yep.
So Andy, why don't can you restate what the topic is that we rolled, and maybe let's start setting some parameters around it.
Yeah, this one's a pretty specific one. So make the most dangerous yet survivable 10 foot by 10 foot by 10 foot room.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so what springs to mind, the 10 foot measurements obviously mm-hmm. call to mind a D&D dungeon room, which often come in 10-foot increments. But, I suppose we could also spin this as, some sort of a small arena, or a very small arena, I guess, or, some sort of a challenge room.
My mind is going towards the movie Cube. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do remember that. Yeah.
That was a series of 10 by 10 by 10 rooms. I mean, I think they were a little bit bigger than that, but I think, I liked a lot about that movie. It's like a 90s horror movie, maybe 80s. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that was 90s, late 90s.
Yeah, late 90s. Super good movie if you like kind of psychological horror, because it was all these rooms sort of connected, all these cube-shaped rooms connected inside of a giant cube. Right. So I don't know, there was probably 60 some rooms or 100 some rooms that made up this big cube. Right. So then if you can imagine, right, as soon as you got into the center of this place a little bit, then every cube had, each one of these rooms had, it would be, 6 exits. Right. So just imagine a D6 and there's a door up top, at bottom, in front of you, back, you're right, all the different directions. So I sort of like that idea. And then even Cube itself, I think each room had a little bit of a gimmick, that was sort of this thing, one of them didn't have air. I'm sure one of them was filled with fire, that sort of stuff.
So how do you make a room that's really dangerous, but survivable? There's a lot of ways to make a room really dangerous. It cannot have air in it, like you said. It can be, the floor can be lava. How do we make something that's dangerous and survivable? Yeah,
I think the survivable to me implies that there's a clever answer to get out, or maybe a few clever answers to get across the room or through it. But there's also a lot of ways for it to go poorly for you if you're not thinking clearly about it. So it's less I think it's less oh, you enter and there's 100 kobolds in there that you have to defeat before you can get across, and more along the lines of there's a puzzle of some sort, maybe, where the incorrect answer has a great consequence.
So we have talked about traps in recent episodes. And I was thinking, could we design a room that you could plop in a dungeon that's not like a devious trap? So a wizard didn't set this up to be dangerous, but what would make it dangerous and exciting without being an intentional trap?
I like that. Can you just, can you kind of explain that a little bit more? I think I like the direction you're heading.
What if it's a relatively natural room about 10 foot by 10 foot and getting out of it is risky somehow? So I don't know. There's an opening. There's a narrow crawl space on the far wall, and widening it enough to fit through causes the ceiling to start to collapse or something.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, the exit sort of implies destruction of the room as you're leaving it.
I sort of like forcing the players to deal with whatever makes it dangerous rather than just running through the room as quickly as they can. And I'm trying to think of things that aren't just a matter of, are you high level enough that you have a spell or magic item that negates this danger for you? Yeah,
maybe let's set that aside, because right, I think we could kind of just keep inventing different spells that could get you out of a trap. So let's maybe kind of ground it a little bit in I don't know, more towards realistic, more towards the real world. So I guess I'm thinking about Blades in the Dark, right? That style of character, right? Where you're good at some stuff, but you don't necessarily have spells.
Yeah, or Indiana Jones, Tomb Raider type stuff. You're competent, you're an action hero, but you don't have a spell that protects you from lava. Okay, let's do that.
Okay, cool. I'm thinking maybe for fun, you enter the room from a hole in the ceiling, right? So maybe you have to make the decision to drop down into it.
Ooh, or I do like that a lot. Yes.
Yeah, or to find a way to lower yourself into it. So maybe it's a direct drop into the room, and there isn't anything to break your fall, or that maybe there is something that breaks your fall. Yeah, I'd say maybe there's nothing, or maybe there's an inch of water or something like that, or 6 inches of water.
Yeah, whatever it is, it's not possible or extremely difficult to get back out the way you came. You must deal with the room's danger long enough to get out of the room by a different way.
Thinking, I think we've talked about this on the podcast too, but the videos of people that do into caves or abandoned bunkers, and stuff, YouTube videos and stuff. I'm wondering if maybe the entrance is one of those things where you have to squeeze through a narrow opening, from up above, and it's it's tight enough that you can't really bring anything with you.
Yeah.
Right, you can't really bring your backpack with you, or you have to throw it in first or something like that. So you have to squeeze through and then find a way to drop down on this into this room.
Okay. Let's do that. I like it a lot. Yes.
Maybe there's 6 inches of water, and then again, just because we're talking about the snakes, maybe for flavor and then also for a little bit of danger, it's just like that water is filled with a bunch of snakes.
Yeah, I do think otherwise mundane encounters can be shaken up in a good way, sometimes by putting a minor nuisance that the PCs just aren't expecting. So, whatever. There's a nest of snakes. Do snakes come in nests? They do.
Yeah, I think so.
There's a pile of snakes. There's snakes in the corner that they don't see at first, but as soon as they go to the second half of the room, whatever they're trying to do is now complicated because snakes are swimming around.
Yeah, they've disturbed them. We can probably just say like if they bite, it would be a bad thing, right? Like they're that sort of snake, right? So I think you have a danger of getting into the room itself. You have the danger of the snakes. I mean, I think the water itself could be somewhat dangerous too, right?
Yeah. Our challenge here is the most dangerous room. So far, so I wonder, what if we amped it up? Like the snakes have deadly venom. So one bite, no matter how many hit points or whatever you have, is game over for you. So the challenge is not, can you survive combat with the snakes. The challenge is, don't let the snakes come near you at all.
That's really good. Yeah. So maybe, a bunch of snakes like that. And then instead of water, maybe the water level's rising in there for some reason, right? There's a storm outside or something like that. So it's some sort of natural water that's flowing through this place, but it's getting deeper.
That's great. Yeah.
Deeper and deeper.
There's I'm already picturing the clock that you would be drawing in Blades of the Dark for this.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess like if it rises too much, right? Like maybe you'd be able to try to get back out the way you came. But I think you could find a way to describe that narrow opening that you're going through in a way that it's pretty clear that you're not going to get back out of that unless you have some sort of ladder.
Although I suppose if the PCs figure out a way back up through the way they came, I guess good for them. But presumably their goal is on the other side of this room, so they're going to have to come back in, except now it's flooded with water.
Yeah, do we want the goal to be another room beyond this, or to get across it, or is there something inside of this room that they then have to get out?
I was thinking that their goal was to get out of the room, but that's a little boring. So what if what they want is in the room? They have to do it or get it and then get back out.
Okay, so what if it's some sort of treasure, and again, Indiana Jones style, treasure, right? Like some sort of lost artifact.
Yeah.
That the podium that it's on or the chest that it's in is what the snakes have decided to use for their nest.
Ooh, yes.
So you could have one of the snakes is it hangs out there, right? Maybe the other ones will come attack, but one of them is just gonna be stuck there, or is curled around the artifact in some fashion.
I do like the idea of the artifact as sort of the PCs can see that as soon as they touch it or trigger it, it's gonna create this cascade of bad things. So can the PCs plan in advance so that they're ready when they reach out and grab the thing and it triggers, the snake comes out and the ceiling collapses and the spike in it, whatever, that they have anticipated it. That would be fun, I think.
Maybe the room is a little bit of a test of both your agility as a party, but then also your detection of what else is in the room.
Yes.
So what you said, it's super obvious as soon as you look that if you move this thing, it's going to trigger a trap of the ceiling falling or something exploding.
And there should be there's evidence of that. I mean, you have to intentionally look around, but when you do, you'll find evidence of the sort of thing that's going to happen when you grab the artifact or whatever. I mean,
I think you can telegraph that too with maybe there's some bones and skeletons or a recent other explorer.
Yeah, the floor. There's several completely flattened adventurers on the floor. Yeah.
A cool thing might be maybe there's a place for three artifacts up there and 2 of them are gone. Ooh. One of them's gone, but then one is being held by a skeleton on the ground. Or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's how you can kind of telegraph a little bit. Or there's scorch marks and stuff on the side. Yeah, I mean we're veering into trap territory, but I think that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so I liked something that you said earlier about like having a way out that they have to like dig through or explode or something like that to get through. I like that idea. It's like you could go back the other way, but maybe we have one other exit for them as well. Maybe it is just because this would scare me. Maybe there's like a hole in the ground that they could try to swim out of.
Yeah, that is always a really scary thing in movies where someone has to swim down and without knowing how long they have to be under there or where it goes,
Yeah. Yeah, don't do it.
I do kind of like, thinking Indiana Jones, I really liked your idea at the end of the room floods over time, but that flooding also can be a way the PCs get back out of the room. And I think of the way that, in an Indiana Jones movie, Indy's caught in the pit of snakes with the giant statues, and all sorts of chaos and shenanigans happen, but the shenanigans that happen are also the things that Indiana Jones uses to get out of the room. Like the option to escape did not exist until he tried to jump on a statue and it fell over and broke through the wall, or something like that.
I think that's good. Yeah. So I think this room is, we got to wrap up pretty soon, but I think this room is fairly survivable. It sounds dangerous again to like a non party full of wizards with cool spells.
Yeah.
Right. Like, just setting wise, that's what we're thinking. Is there any like last little detail that you want to add?
I don't think so, except that 10 feet by 10 feet is a very small amount of space. And so I think if your game system allows, I think it would really add to the difficulty if you made that 10 feet feel as small as you possibly could. So the PCs can't walk through each other. So if there's 4 PCs in there and snakes and an artifact thing, I don't know, I play that, really play that up. You're reaching over, you're bumping into each other every time you turn around.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, well, the aircraft is gone, but now there's some sort of siren heading down my street. Yeah. So maybe that is our cue to wrap up the episode, actually, because I think we both have some other stuff to get to. So
yeah.
All right, well, maybe. So this was fun. It would be fun to talk more about this, but at the same time, I'm pretty happy with what we came up with. So
yeah, I think this is good. I think the only other thing that I want to say is make it so the snakes can like somehow jump across the width of the room, because that's gonna definitely happen, right? Yeah. I do also like the image of the water rising and the snakes also rising up with it. So like you have them down at your feet, but then as the water's rising, they're up at your knees.
What is worse than like snakes slithering around on your feet? Snakes like swimming at eye level. Like,
much worse. Okay, all right. Well, let's wrap it up there.
Yep.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, thanks everybody for listening. We really appreciate it. And we're going to probably get back a little bit to somewhat of a more normal schedule pretty soon. Like we mentioned earlier, Andy and I have had some travel and some other stuff going on. But yeah, looking forward to the summer winding down, at least for me.
Yeah, thanks for indulging us the last episode or two where we sort of did maybe a little bit more personal rambling than we usually do. So anyway, it's been fun.
Yep. As always, please reach out if you have anything to say to us. There's a contact page on our website where you can get our email addresses. We love hearing from people. But as always, I've been Chris Salzman.
I've been Andy Rao.
And remember, if your player's having fun, you're a great GM.